Cultural Insights, Medieval Knighthood. Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide to your daily journey through the past to empower the future. Today is Thursday, May 30th, 2025. As we do every Thursday, we're exploring a fascinating cultural practice from history that continues to influence our world. Today, we turn our attention to medieval knighthood, one of history's most enduring and romanticized cultural institutions. Far more than simply mounted warriors, knights represented a complex social class, moral code, and cultural ideal that shaped European civilization for centuries and continues to influence our concepts of honor, service, and heroism today. What makes medieval knighthood particularly fascinating is how it evolved from a practical military necessity into an elaborate cultural system encompassing warfare, religion, social hierarchy, literature, and ethics. The ideals of chivalry that emerged from knightly culture have profoundly influenced Western concepts of proper conduct, romantic love, and heroic behavior. So let's explore this remarkable cultural institution, examining its origins in the chaos of medieval Europe, its development into an elaborate code of conduct, and its lasting influence on literature, values, and social expectations that persist to this day. The origins of knighthood lie in the turbulent centuries following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. As centralized authority crumbled across Europe, local strongmen emerged to fill the power vacuum. The development of heavy cavalry became crucial in this era of constant warfare, as mounted warriors could dominate battlefields and control territory more effectively than foot soldiers. The stirrup, introduced to Europe from Asia around the 8th century, revolutionized mounted combat. This simple innovation allowed riders to strike with the full force of their horses' momentum while remaining securely seated, making heavy cavalry devastatingly effective. However, maintaining a warhorse, armor, and weapons was extremely expensive, limiting this military role to the wealthy elite. Initially, these mounted warriors were simply professional soldiers serving local lords in exchange for land grants called fiefs. The feudal system that emerged formalized these relationships. Knights received land in exchange for military service, creating a hierarchy of mutual obligations that would define medieval society. By the 11th century, knighthood had begun evolving beyond mere military function. The violent realities of medieval life created a need for codes of conduct to regulate the behavior of armed elites. The Church played a crucial role in this transformation, seeking to channel knightly violence toward Christian purposes and impose moral restraints on warriors. The concept of chivalry emerged gradually, combining Germanic warrior traditions with Christian ethics and courtly refinement. The term itself derives from the French chivalry, meaning horsemanship, but it came to encompass a complex moral and social code governing knightly behavior. Central to chivalric ideals was the concept of honor, which demanded courage in battle, loyalty to one's lord, protection of the innocent, and courtesy toward all. Knights were expected to be generous, truthful, and merciful, especially toward defeated enemies and those weaker than themselves. These ideals represented a dramatic departure from earlier warrior cultures that celebrated ruthless violence and personal glory. The Church's influence on knighthood culminated in the development of religious knighthood during the Crusades. Military orders like the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller combined monastic vows with military service, creating warrior monks dedicated to defending Christianity. These orders established the highest ideals of knightly behavior, emphasizing poverty, chastity, and obedience alongside martial prowess. The Crusades themselves became the ultimate expression of knightly purpose, offering warriors the opportunity to serve God while seeking glory and adventure. Crusading knights saw themselves as soldiers of Christ, fighting to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. This religious dimension elevated knighthood from a secular military role to a sacred calling. The literature of courtly romance, which flourished from the 12th century onward, further refined and popularized chivalric ideals. Epic poems like the Song of Roland and Arthurian romances created legendary knights whose adventures embodied perfect chivalric behavior. These stories established many of the knightly virtues we still recognize: selfless service, romantic devotion, quest for justice, and willingness to sacrifice for noble causes. The Arthurian legends, in particular, became the supreme expression of chivalric ideals. King Arthur's Round Table represented perfect knightly fellowship, where warriors bound by honor served justice and protected the innocent. Knights like Lancelot, Galahad, and Percival became archetypes of chivalric perfection, their quests for the Holy Grail symbolizing the spiritual dimensions of knighthood. These literary works didn't merely reflect existing values but actively shaped them. Real knights increasingly tried to model their behavior on literary heroes, creating a feedback loop between fiction and reality that elevated chivalric expectations. Tournaments and courtly ceremonies incorporated elements from Romance literature, blurring the lines between ideal and practice. The reality of medieval knighthood, however, was often far removed from chivalric ideals. Knights were, fundamentally, professional warriors in a violent age, and their behavior frequently fell short of literary standards. Warfare remained brutal, with knights often showing little mercy to enemies or consideration for non-combatants. The protection of the innocent was frequently honored more in breach than observance. Economic considerations also shaped knightly behavior in ways that contradicted chivalric ideals. Knights needed to profit from warfare to maintain their expensive lifestyle and equipment. Ransoming prisoners, looting, and extracting tribute from conquered territories were practical necessities that often conflicted with ideals of generosity and mercy. Despite these contradictions, the cultural impact of chivalric ideals was profound. The notion that those with power had corresponding moral obligations became deeply embedded in European culture. The concept of noblesse oblige, that nobility obliged one to honorable and generous behavior, directly derives from chivalric traditions. Chivalric culture also revolutionized concepts of romantic love. The tradition of courtly love, which emerged alongside knighthood, established new ideals of romantic devotion and refined emotional expression. Knights were expected to serve noble ladies with the same dedication they showed their lords, elevating women to positions of moral authority and inspiring centuries of romantic literature. The elaborate ceremonies and pageantry surrounding knighthood also had lasting cultural influence. The dubbing ceremony, where a young man was formally inducted into knighthood, became a sacred ritual combining religious blessing with social recognition. Tournaments evolved from military training exercises into spectacular entertainments that displayed chivalric virtues and reinforced social hierarchies. Heraldry, the system of symbols identifying knights and noble families, developed sophisticated artistic and genealogical traditions that persist today. Coats of arms became visual representations of family history and honor, with complex rules governing their design and inheritance. The language and imagery of heraldry continues to influence graphic design, corporate logos, and national symbols. The decline of knighthood as a military force began in the later Middle Ages. Changes in military technology and tactics gradually reduced the effectiveness of heavy cavalry. The English longbow proved devastating against French knights at battles like Crécy and Agincourt, while Swiss pikemen developed formations that could defeat cavalry charges. The introduction of gunpowder weapons further diminished the battlefield dominance of mounted knights. Professional infantry armies, paid for by increasingly powerful monarchs, gradually replaced feudal levies of knights as the dominant military force. The rise of centralized nation-states reduced the importance of local warrior elites, while commercial economies made land-based feudal relationships less relevant. However, even as knighthood lost military significance, its cultural influence persisted and evolved. The Renaissance saw renewed interest in chivalric literature and ideals, with works like Cervantes' Don Quixote, both satirizing and celebrating knightly traditions. The emerging concept of the gentleman incorporated many chivalric virtues, adapting medieval ideals of honor and courtesy to changing social conditions. The Romantic movement of the 18th and 19th centuries experienced a full-scale revival of interest in medieval knighthood. Writers like Sir Walter Scott romanticized medieval life, while the Gothic revival in architecture drew inspiration from the medieval period when knighthood flourished. This romanticization often ignored the harsh realities of medieval life, creating idealized visions of knightly honor and romantic love. Modern concepts of heroism owe much to chivalric traditions. The idea that heroes should be selfless, brave, and dedicated to protecting others directly derives from knightly ideals. Superheroes in popular culture often embody chivalric virtues, serving others without expectation of reward and adhering to moral codes that prevent them from using their power for personal gain. Military traditions worldwide have preserved many aspects of knightly culture. Officer classes in modern armies often trace their ethos to chivalric ideals of honor, duty, and sacrifice. Military academies teach codes of conduct that emphasize service before self, protection of subordinates, and personal integrity, principles that would be familiar to medieval knights. The concept of sportsmanship also derives from chivalric traditions. The idea that competitors should show respect for opponents, accept defeat gracefully, and compete with honor rather than winning at any cost reflects medieval ideals of knightly conduct. Even the term fair play echoes chivalric concepts of honorable behavior. In our contemporary world, knightly ideals continue to influence expectations of leadership and public service. Politicians and business leaders are often judged by standards that derive from chivalric traditions, the expectation that power should be used responsibly, that leaders should serve others rather than themselves, and that those in authority should protect rather than exploit those under their care. The persistence of these ideals in modern culture demonstrates the enduring appeal of chivalric values, even in societies very different from medieval Europe. The knight as cultural archetype represents humanity's aspiration to combine strength with morality, power with responsibility, and courage with compassion. Of course, we must also acknowledge the limitations and problems inherent in chivalric culture. The knight was fundamentally an elite warrior whose lifestyle depended on the labor of peasants and the spoils of warfare. Chivalric ideals were largely restricted to the noble class, with little consideration for the welfare of common people. The glorification of warfare and violence, even when constrained by moral codes, contributed to centuries of conflict and suffering. The gendered nature of chivalric ideals also reflected and reinforced medieval social hierarchies. While courtly love elevated certain women to positions of symbolic authority, it did so within a fundamentally patriarchal system that limited women's actual power and agency. The ideal of the knight protecting helpless damsels reinforced notions of female weakness and dependence. Despite these limitations, the cultural legacy of medieval knighthood remains significant. The transformation of brutal warriors into idealized guardians of justice and morality represents one of history's most remarkable cultural achievements. The creation of elaborate moral codes to govern the behavior of the powerful established precedents for ethical leadership that continue to influence our expectations of those in authority. Medieval knighthood demonstrates how cultural institutions can evolve far beyond their original purposes. What began as a practical military arrangement became an elaborate cultural system encompassing religion, literature, romance, and ethics. The ideals developed within knightly culture spread throughout medieval society and beyond, shaping concepts of honor, service, and heroism that persist in various forms today. As we face contemporary challenges of leadership, ethics, and social responsibility, the medieval knight offers both inspiration and cautionary lessons. The aspiration to combine power with moral responsibility, to serve others rather than oneself, and to maintain honor even at personal cost remains relevant. However, we must also learn from the limitations of chivalric culture, ensuring that our ideals of service and protection extend to all members of society, not just elites. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of medieval knighthood and its enduring cultural influence. Tomorrow, we'll be back with our Economic Milestones episode where we'll be examining the establishment of the Silk Road trade network and its impact on global commerce and cultural exchange. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. How do you see chivalric ideals reflected in modern culture? Let us know in the comments section below. For our members, this Sunday we'll have a special roundup of cultural traditions from around the world with additional insights and analysis. We'll explore how ancient codes of conduct continue to influence contemporary values and expectations. Until next time, I'm your guide for History Explained, where we believe that understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.